All right. Well, welcome everyone. We're going to go through some basic stuff. First of all, I'm going to generally mute everyone's mic during the presentation so that we don't get audio feedback. After the video, if you have a question, you want to start talking, you may have to unmute your mic in order for us to hear you. Let's see, what else? Yeah. A little bit of an introduction about Graham. I met Graham Lockwood in India. We got invited to a beautiful kite festival in Kerala, India. It was myself, him, and Nasri Ahmed, and we were the only international kite flyers at this event. And really had a chance to sit down and chat with both of those guys and learn more about them. And I learned a lot about the uniqueness that Graham brings to the kite field. And he's a very special guy with wonderful stories. And he has this story that he would like to share with everyone. And he recorded this, and it's about Chinese kites. So let me go ahead and unpin myself. And we're going to present a Chrome tab. Go. Hopefully this will pop up. And make sure to keep admitting, folks. All right, so here we go. Here is Graham Lockwood telling his story. I would suggest that you click on that closed captioning button at the bottom. It may help with reading what Graham is saying. He has a pretty thick accent, but yeah, here we go.
Hello, I'd like to tell you a story, or to be more precise, I'd like to share with you a collection of stories that goes back almost 300 years. My involvement with the story started on February 18th, 2014, when I was invited to attend a series of kite festivals in the Far East, in Malaysia and Thailand. I flew out to Singapore, where I met several of the invited flyers, and we travelled north to the first festival on the list, Pasir Gudang. Travelling north to Kedah and north again up into Thailand for Satoon. It was in Kedah that I first met Mr. Andreas Hagren, a renowned designer and flyer, originally from Sweden but now living in Bali. On my tours around kite festivals, I usually record the guests, the flyers, the designers in an album on my Facebook page, and if there's a story involved, that makes it all the more interesting. And on this particular festival in Kedah, Andreas had an incredible story. He was flying two kites, two arrow-shaped kites. A black one pointing up and a red one pointing down. These two kites were tethered to one line. This line was cut, and the kites disappeared over the horizon. An extensive search was launched, but they never found the kites, and they were deemed lost forever. That was until a flyer returning back to the festival saw the kites in the middle of a field. So he rescued them, brought them back, and owner and kites were reunited. Andreas then, later on in the day, launched them again. And being satisfied that they were flying securely and stable, he decided to go and replenish his water bottle. Whilst he was gone, the wind dropped and the kites started floating back to Earth. Before they reached the Earth, they got entangled with the national grid system. But that's another story. On my return home, I noticed on Facebook that several of the flyers that were at the festivals in Malaysia and Thailand were now touring China. One photograph in particular caught my eye. On this photograph is Edo Baguette from Italy, and Jamshed Babalu from India and Andreas sat on a settee in the foyer of a hotel in China. Next to them there was an empty chair, and jokingly I wrote on Andreas' timeline, "Please put my name on that empty chair." The dialogue that followed goes like this. "Tell me, Andreas, how on earth did you get to be on a tour of kite festivals in China?" "Oh, that's easy," he said. "I organised the tour." "Then you're the man that I want to speak to," I said. And it's that dialogue that got me invited along to the next festival in 2015 in China. My first trip to China was in 2015, when a group of international kite flyers met in the town of Kongqin in the province of Sichuan in southwest China for a 4-festival tour, visiting the cities of Chongqing, Xi'an, Beijing and Weifang. After a very cold and damp start to our tour in the fairy mountains of Chongqing, we travelled north to Xi'an, a fantastic city where we met a group of remarkable kinetic kite builders. But that's another story. Moving on north, we arrived in Beijing, where our number increased to 12. This is where my main story is set. During the period between festivals, we were taken to many interesting and historic places. One of our visits was to a kite manufacturing establishment, the Shangxiong Kite Factory, that produced handmade traditional Chinese kites. After a tour of the workshops, we were taken into the showrooms where many kites were on display, and given the history of how this establishment had grown from very humble beginnings. On leaving, we had a chance to meet Kong Ling Ming, the owner and manager of the establishment. Kong Ling Ming had inherited the love of traditional kites from his father, Kong Jiangze. More about Kong Ling Ming later, as my main story will now concentrate on Kong Jiangze. There are several versions of this story, and I will try to explain the most logical. Kong Jiangze was born in 1920, the son of Kong Fanjin, a commander-in-chief of the Shanxi-Gansu border defense. Kong is the surname of the family that traces back to Confucius, one of China's most famous philosophers. For thousands of years, emperors regarded him to be the greatest sage, whose direct descendants were given inheritable titles through various dynasties. During the Ming dynasty, a Kong family descendant moved from Shandong to Hefei. Kong family members then wrote to Kong Fanjin, who was born in Jinan, the provincial capital. He had become a trusted high-level official in the imperial court and a senior general guard in Gansu province. The members told their influential relative that their ancestral temple in Haifa needed to be repaired and renovated. The general replied that it would be better to rebuild the structure into a larger one. He sent them a large amount of money, which was used to construct buildings with more than 60 rooms on a 2,500 square metre site. The Kong family boasts the world's longest recorded history. The patrilineal family tree, now in its 83rd generation, has been recorded since the death of Confucius. As a young man, Konzianze was obsessed with fine art, although his father objected. He went on to study sculpture and art at the Bihao Academy of Fine Arts. While at university studying under a Japanese professor, China being under the Japanese rule at that time, 1937-1945, he was sent to an antique dealer to view a collection of manuscripts written by the author Cao Yatsen, who was a Chinese writer during the Qing dynasty, 1636 to 1912. He is best known as the writer of The Dream of the Red Chamber, one of the 4 great classical novels of Chinese literature. The 8 manuscripts were handwritten and set to document ways that ordinary citizens could make a living out of various crafts. Because the professor and Konzianze were interested in kites, Konzianze was given permission to copy Volume 2 of the manuscripts, but prohibited to use photography. After 26 days, the 8 volumes were taken back to Japan and never seen again. The story goes that Cao Yatsen was approached by a friend who had fallen on hard times. His friend asked Cao to teach him to make kites. Cao agreed, and later his friend returned to his own village. A couple of years later, Cao Yatsen was passing through the village and stopped to see his friend. The friend had become a successful kite maker and was able to support his family and pay off his debts. Cao decided then to write a book on making kites as a way to help others who needed a skill. He saw it as a much better way to help people in trouble rather than just give them money. A skill allows people to help themselves and make their own lives better. Taking this a stage further to 8 volumes. Konzianze is the 83rd generation direct descendant of the philosopher Confucius and spent 40 years perfecting the art of building traditional Chinese kites from the information taken from volume 2 of the 8 volumes written by Cao Yatsen during the Qing dynasty. During the early years, Konzianze taught Hu Yai, the last Chinese emperor to build and fly kites. He was so appreciative of these skills that he insisted that his kites were called cow kites and not Kong kites. Konzianze never made a living from building kites, but sought to keep alive the ancient traditions of Chinese kite building. During the Cultural Revolution, he became a prime target for the revolutionaries whose sole intentions were to rid China of old traditions and start everything anew. He was beaten 6 times, losing consciousness on several occasions, and all his possessions trashed. Konzianze took refuge in the northeast all by himself, and his ambition of promoting cow kites was first forced to stop. Konzianze persevered, but it was not until 1977 did he take up the task of producing the collections of waste each side, a poor translation which will be better translated to the collected manuscripts of lost art, now known as Fay Nits High Collection. In 1979, Kongzianze held a kite festival in the Summer Palace in Beijing, and later cow family kites were displayed at the Beijing Flower and Kite Fair held in 1980, attracting many visitors. Then, in 1984, Kongzianze assisted in the building of the first Cow Yatsen Memorial Hall to display the kites. Since then, the kites have been awarded prizes successfully both at domestic and international contests and fairs. Throughout this period, Kongzianze encouraged his son, Kong Ling Min, and his grandson, Kong Bingjiang, along with many kite enthusiasts, to take up the challenge of promoting cow kites. In 2011, the cow kite craftsmanship was included in the Cultural Heritage Protection List, and in 2018, 42 kites, co-copied by Kongzianze, Kong Ling Min and Kong Bingjiang, were officially entered. Kong Ling Min managed the family business for many years, which was solely aimed at producing kites. Now in the 21st century, the emphasis has changed. The Changjiang Kite Factory has now become one of 4 training centres for building of kites, while Kong Ling Min teaches kite building from home. His kites, being collector's items, command high prices. Kong Bingjiang, on the other hand, has become a school teacher, but still finds time to build kites. I'd now like to share with you a video of the Changjiang Kite Factory, which the group of international flyers visited in 2015.
联络人是谁，跟QQ有个电话，你一打就可以了，我们就都会接了。哦，都会接，可以可以。你说逃开的我不知道。哦，这个是对，说这个我不知道。走了。Otherwise, the band will dry. The end of the
Why is it when I go near, they don't allow me to have a when you go in, it's okay.
都往屋里走，往屋里走。我都往屋里走，都往那里边走啊！对对对对。都往屋里边走，有人给讲解。除了基本上可以啊。
们给你搞定了，我以后一定有人来。
这是成熟的男人。对，他就是人，他就是人。请看他家里的其他的。在地愿为连理之。他画的是中国的古代。你给他翻一下。你先生。你队长。你班长。来，这个飞啊。没事，我说现在。好，那你俩一会儿翻一下。蓝色代表男女。
With my phone also, yes. Please.
Huh?
With my phone, yes.
Oh, sorry. But it's going to video again.
No,
Is it video?
必须得办一场。那些都叫他会导师。来，对，这叫会歌，没有，里面全部没有会名两个字。
我从小看你是说，后来流行的在后的那后的内容啊，我看了这里没有。
All right, a big thank you to Graham for sending in that video. And we're hoping to post it to YouTube or one of our other channels a little bit later. However, I wanted to call on Paul. I hear you have a story to add to this overall story.
Yes, I think so. And the story I have predates Graham. I think it was about 1996, 97. Li Rosin, the Chinese kite maker that you saw in the film right at the end, came over to England to make his man-powered aeroplane. And I was got hold of to help him do everything. So I got him to go gliding. I helped out a lot with him. And then in 97, I went to China. I've been going there every year since 94, I think. And when I got there, I was hosted by Li Rosin, and he said to me, "What do you want to see?" And there was some options: sports kites or traditional kites. So of course I said, "Let's see some traditional kites." So I got taken off. I went into the Hutong, the small buildings near the bell tower in just north of the Forbidden City, and got taken to meet Li Rosin. Kong, and I don't know if you can see that if the light's right, but it's a picture of me with Kong and the family, and it was really interesting going into a traditional Chinese house, meeting him with just the local Chinese people, but he told part of his story at that time, and then got out a number of very small kites. He was known for his miniatures, and he showed me one, which was the picture that you saw in the film of the small imperial swallow with the 5 imperial dragons on. And he told me that he'd made kites for Puyi, the last emperor, and he was going to present it to the last emperor, but unfortunately the last emperor died shortly before he could do that. So I felt that was amazing for me, because it was one of these weird things. You go to China and you find not only the last emperor's last kite maker, but you also find the last emperor's last kite. Anyway, we spent some time with Kong. I went off, and then a few years later I wanted to find him again, and I went with my Chinese friends. So we went into the area, but I couldn't remember where he lived. So we eventually found a hairdresser's, and we went in and we said, "Kong Hanze, Tazaina," and it just happened that we'd walked into the hairdresser's where Kong's daughter, it may be Kong's son's wife, but she said, "Oh, well, that's my father." So she dropped everything. They shut the hairdressers, took me off to Kong, and then we took him out to a very good Beijing duck restaurant where he started to tell his story. And so he told the story about working with the having access to the Japanese book, him copying it, him wanting to make all the kites, but during the Cultural Revolution, everything got trashed. And now he was desperate to try to reproduce the book and everything, but of course it had all gone. We went back to, I'm sure it was his daughter's house. This was after we left him, and she was making beautiful kites. Kong himself didn't sell anything. His son did, I think, but the daughter also made kites that you would sell on the street. And I was suddenly faced with her pouring out loads and loads and loads and loads of kites, and I wanted to buy them all, but you've just had lunch with them and they're friends, and you can only buy one or two because otherwise it makes you look greedy. So it was really quite difficult. But that was how I met Kong, and since then I've sort of followed him through a bit. He's produced, or through his assistants, and I think Andrea Zagran was probably involved. I don't know if you can see, but there's a wonderful book of the cow kites, but it's not just one volume. It comes in, each kite is separately described, and these are great big, I don't know, can you see that properly?
Yes, yeah, you can see it. If you lift it up just a little bit and bring it towards your head, the whole thing will be in the photo.
Okay,
there you go.
because I can see where I am. Yeah. Okay, so one of the volumes has got details of the kites, but it doesn't have the last emperor's kite in it. And then the other volume is just absolutely beautiful because it's showing the script, and then I think it's trying to describe the individual kites. I don't know how he got back to the original document from the from Cow, but anyway, but they seem to have done it. And the book itself comes in a beautiful box, and I don't know how rare this is, but I managed to get hold of a copy. I think there is a version published in English, so there might be a copy in the Kite Museum. The other thing somebody mentioned was how old the Chinese kites, and they do go back a huge long way. It's very difficult to pinpoint what went on because there's lots of stories, but finding actual documentation is unbelievably difficult. The existing kites seem to be the ones in the National Air and Space Museum. Paul Garber showed me quite a few. They came over for there was a big exhibition in 1889, 1890s, and there I saw them in Silver Hill with Paul Garber years ago, so they must be around. But there's also a series of very nice kites from China, from the 1890s in the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. And I think I showed, oh, let's grab it. I just saw it again. If I take it out of the envelope, but there's, the light's all wrong otherwise, but there's this one. Can you see that one? Does that show up or not?
Yes, it does. And yeah. Paul, just real quick, this is my time cue. I'm gonna hop off and get the other session started. Mitch Cordova is doing build along. So let me go get that session started, but I'm going to mute my mic and turn off my camera. So feel free to keep chatting, and yeah, okay.
Okay, there's just one more thing I was going to say. I've got a lot of very old books, and I've been collecting and putting together a library of Japanese woodblock books. And one of the books I've got dates from the 1790s, and that's got 2 or 3 pages on how to make Chinese kites. And I don't know of anything that's older than that. I've not seen anything in China itself, and I've been searching for stuff within Japan, and I can't find anything earlier than that. So although the Chinese, it's quite right, they go back probably 1,000 years or so, finding the documentation for it is incredibly difficult. Right, I'm going to shut up then. Everybody else can have a go now.
Actually, I have a question then of is perhaps some of the difficulty in finding those older kites in China and Japan is because of the materials that were used, and in a way they're designed to degrade?
Yeah, I think so. The kites that I brought back from Weifang in '94 are beginning to fall apart because the silk, they use Shandong silk. That doesn't really last. I've got old kites, not Chinese ones, but the Cody kites from the 1900s. That silk is in really bad condition. So anything done on silk isn't going to last for more than maybe 100, 150 years. I don't know. The modern kites, the Tianjin kites, were done on paper, and I expect that there must be remnants of that. But an awful lot of stuff was destroyed during the Cultural Revolution, and people were encouraged to get rid of all that material. And if they were found with it, they were pilloried. So I think a huge amount of traditional artifacts were lost, although the kite makers themselves survived. Don't know what else to say about that. Yeah, it's really difficult trying to find stuff though. Anyway, I've done my bit. She's gone. Oh no,
Well, no, I'm still here. I just had to go get the other one set up and ready to run. Thank you so much for that addition to Graham's little presentation. I like having kind of the whole roundabout discussion. I highly suggest for everyone else that's online, I posted a link to Graham's Facebook page. And let me turn on my camera real quick. Sorry. Oh, my battery died. That's why. But I highly suggest you go check out Graham's Facebook page. He has a really amazing collection of kite makers, kite flyers, and just generally from all around the world, people that are involved in kite flying. And he's asked them some questions. He gets a little bit of information about them, and he has photos of their work along with their autograph. And his albums it's an interesting take on present day history of our kite community plus others, I guess, kind of looking back a little bit. So let's see if I can get my camera back on. Oh,
yeah, if you can, take a look at Graham's automata as well. He makes these moving sculptures, and they're really good. They're really funny.
Yeah, he's a character. He's also fun when he's singing around a pint. So
Well, he comes from Northumberland, that's why.
yeah. So, all right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump out of this conversation completely and head on over to the Spinning Drogue Tail build along with Mitch Cordova. I'll post a link to that in the chat here. And highly encourage you guys to join that one, as well as the long distance collaboration chat that is at 1 p.m. I'll post a link to that one as well. You can find all this information on fortunafound.com or on the web page, the Facebook page for the We Fly Global Kite Conference. So thanks, everybody. You guys can continue to chat. It will keep recording until the last person leaves. So talk to you guys later, or see you in the next one.
Cheerio, bye. Right. Is there any discussion, or we're all going to go away now?
Well, this is Rhonda Brewer, and I would like to thank you for your presentation. I got on just a tiny bit late, but I'm looking forward to watching the recorded part and catch up on the info. So several years ago here in Lincoln City, God, I hate to think how many years ago, Chinese delegation came over and they brought over several hand painted bits and pieces and unfinished kites that were just framed and weren't prepared to fly. And I am seeing some of the fabrics start to decay on those pieces that I have. So, and they've just been in indirect sunlight up on the wall in our guest bedroom, so no direct sunlight. So I'm looking for some ideas on how to either preserve them or to maybe trim off the excess white that's falling apart and maybe mounting them and framing them. But just some really nice pieces that we were able to secure. And I know they probably weren't the best of what they did. That's why they brought them over, but we're really pleased to have them. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I've been trying to restore some of my old stuff. The kites were probably made using Shandong silk, but they put a coating on it. They must, yeah, they treat it so that it can be painted, and it's probably that treatment that's actually destroying the silk. It makes it go brittle. You could try backing it with very light silk. I've been repairing mine with very, very fine Japanese washi that's used for book repairs. And I tend to use one of those book pastes that the conservators use. But you need to try out a repair on a small part that's not noticeable, just in case there's some bleed through from the paste.
Ah, excellent idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, I was curious about, do you know exactly what they use to coat that silk with? Is it an organic product, which I presume it is, or like a rice paste or a wheat paste? What is it?
I think it must be a wheat-based paste of some sort. Not wheat, rice-based.
A rice-based starch or something of that nature.
So, yeah, I know years ago I went out and I bought a lot of it from a roll because I wanted to try and work with it, and I've still got some, and that's probably okay. That's been rolled up in the dark, but the other kites, if you're flying them, they do tend to fray and crack and split, and then you're in the job of trying to repair. You really want to go and repair the splits before they get too bad. But small pieces of this Japanese paper repair tape is good, or very, very light silk. You have to do.
And are you, when you say backing it, are you actually stitching the silk to the back of the piece, or are you just using it as a backdrop that you lay the kite to?
I've got. I don't know if you can see me.
I can.
I have it's all gone rotten, but it's. I use. I don't know if you can see it. It's a silver tin with almond-smelling paste in it. It's used by bookbinders to for pasting up, but it's also what's used by conservators. You've got to be really careful that if you're actually pasting something onto the surface, if it tightens up, then you'll get wrinkles and it'll start to destroy the. So you need to try it. You need to experiment.
Sure.
And if you use a material that's heavier than the kite material, then that will dominate the gluing process. So I found that the lighter material that you use is going to work better.
Okay. So a silk, not a rice paper or anything like that.
You could probably, if you got Gampi, that might work. But my friends in Japan sent me some what they call repair paper, and that's for Japanese kites, and I've been using that quite happily. Or I've got some very, very light silk as well.
Right.
A matter of looking at what you've got and trying to make sure that that it's sympathetic to what you're doing.
Wonderful. Well, cool. Appreciate that. Hey, Rhonda, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I've been a little worried about you and the fires over there, and I'm hoping everything came out okay.
Well, we were lucky enough to be several miles away from, I think Dave Gomberg, if you know Dave.
Yes. Yeah.
The fire was much closer to his house, and actually, Deb Cooley, who has passed away a
Yeah.
couple of years ago, her
Right.
house, her property, which had been sold, was completely demolished, and that
Oh.
property was in between another friend of ours and David's house, and it was like the fire just beat a path right in between the two properties,
Wow.
besides other areas. But it's been interesting, the pictures that are coming out right at the moment of properties that are completely destroyed being right next to buildings that were barely touched. I mean,
I've seen
um,
that. It's just like it's like a tornado. It handpicks in a way, that's the wrong word, but it just selects certain areas and then it stops and goes elsewhere. It's
yeah, it's just absolutely amazing. And luckily in our area, we had 293 buildings. They finished the survey,
yeah.
so we are small in comparison to the rest of Oregon. Other towns completely demolished, and as you watch on Facebook, you're going to see more and more pictures come
Wow.
up of just the destruction. And and we had a bit of ash land on our cars and stuff, and I was going to gather some of it up, kind of like Mount St. Helens ash,
Yeah, yeah.
but then the rains came in and kind of washed things down, and so what little tiny bit I've got, um it's amazing to think of where it blew in from,
Oh,
what part of the destruction it was. But luckily, like I say, there was no loss of life.
phenomenal.
So
Well, I'm so
in
grateful that
in
you
our
guys in any way.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, I mean, we were in between the 1 and 2 evacuation sites, and so we
Right.
kind of were neighborhood watch for our neighbors, and we helped our neighbors. We had gas cookers and just did what we could to take care of the people that were here, and to watch the properties of those that weren't. And it was an
Yeah.
experience. I mean,
Oh,
when you
yeah.
start thinking about what you're going to put in your car, at least we were lucky enough to have that choice, have that time. There was
Mhm.
others. One man opened his front door, grabbed his dog, car wouldn't start, so they ran through the woods, and it took them quite a bit of time to get to safety. But
Oh my
that was
gosh.
the closest, yeah, of what we heard in this area. There are others
Yeah.
in other areas that didn't make it, but overall, I mean, it was amazing what I put in the car. My husband put in his van. I still haven't unpacked my car. I think I'm kind of still
I know.
recuperating from
Yeah, recovering from the
all of
whole
this.
trauma of it all. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway,
Cool.
so I'm so excited. Thank you, Graham. Graham, right? Am I saying the
No,
correct name?
no, I'm not Graham.
Paul.
I'm
No,
Paul.
no, you're not Graham. I mean,
I'm
I'm so appreciate the presentation of
of
that
Graham. It's
was,
really good. Can I
yeah,
just show
of
you,
Graham. That's what
please?
I meant.
That was the last emperor's kite.
Oh,
Can you see
Oh,
wow.
that?
wow.
Can you see the jam jar?
Yes.
It's a tiny little
Yes.
kite. Isn't that fun?
It's really, really tiny, and he made other kites that were equally small. Of course, he
Wow.
coming to the end of his time, and then this was him in the Hutong. He came out with quite a few kites for me to photograph.
How
And
fun.
I ought to do something with Graham, and we ought to produce a book about him. But I like doing documentary type photography of kite makers. I go all
Yeah.
over the place doing it, and I've been planning this for a long time. But the more you plan it, the more you want to do it right, and the longer you leave it. So
Yeah.
You just got to get started.
I've just finished a book about Beijing pigeon whistles. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, I know. And I've done several, but this one was quite special because I know Lee Rosin, I know Kong, and the rest of it. And now he's died. It's a good time to go out and get everything, scan all the photographs, and put it all together.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, but it's bad news about your about the fires. We could see them from England.
Yes.
We just can't
Oh,
comprehend what it's like.
well, I think the thing, even being here and being so close, the part that you can see all the pictures, you can listen to the videos, but it's when you can smell and when you
Right.
can touch that it really hits home. All the senses record.
It must be absolutely
Yep.
devastating. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
true.
and I mean, there's a hill and a long street down our drive or down our in front of our house, and it goes to the north, and the fires were to the north and east of us, and so we had a good visual of what was happening as far as over the ridge. We couldn't actually
Right.
see the fires, but it was far enough away that we had plenty of time to escape if we needed to.
Yeah.
And
But presumably,
and
it's going
what
to cost.
was really bad was so many people had panicked that they just clogged the highway going south because the highway going north was shut off because it went right past the fires. And so people were taking 8 hours to get 30 miles.
Oh my
And
God.
it
Yeah.
was just ridiculous. And there's Monday, tomorrow, there's going to be a community-wide debriefing of what went well and what absolutely failed miserably on this. And see,
Right.
we're prepared for tsunami,
For sure. Oh, yeah.
yeah, we know what to do on a tsunami, but on a fire, just completely. I mean,
Took you
our fire department.
unawares.
Yeah. And our fire department, they did what they could and then got reinforcements and others took over, but they still were out there just doing what they could. And but anyway, but the good news is, you think, oh my gosh, look at the histories that we have in our house of
Oh, I
kiting
know.
and people we know, and then you look at other people's homes that are just gone.
Yeah.
And
It's
the
devastating.
heartbreaking memories and the devastation and the emotional trauma. And I'm thankful and for everybody that did survive and that their houses survived. And this is
And
going to sound
then
bad, but in a good way. The one good thing is, well, you don't have a lot of stuff you got to get rid of now, and you can, basically start rebuilding, and
Yeah.
you'll have a lot of new stuff. But I mean, that's very tongue in cheek, and
Yeah.
I sometimes I wonder, I think, gosh, if we had a little mini disaster, it would be a lot easier than trying to clean out the house, I know I'm sick. Anyway, all right. Well, so nice talking to both of you. I'm going to head off to Mitch's class, and then Lindsay will be on at 1 for collaborating from a distance, and that's going to be an interesting because I've watched it all happen here, and it's an interesting process.
Yeah, we've
up until 3 o'clock in the morning last night, so
because
it's an 8-hour time difference, so I'm going to go to bed early.
Okay.
All right. Catch you a little bit later on.
Take care.
See you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.